Hey guys, tonight's story isn't about knights, castles, or heroic battles. It's about something far stranger. What happened when you got sick in the Middle Ages? No antibiotics, no hospitals, just leeches, prayers, and sometimes burning herbs stuffed in very uncomfortable places. We're leaving behind the clean scent of rubbing alcohol and the soft beeping of machines. Instead, we're stepping into smoky huts, dirt covered hands, and the gentle rustle of herbs tied with string. If your eyes are heavy and your curiosity is still awake, dim the lights, fluff your pillow, and let's gently drift back through time into the forgotten, sometimes bizarre world of medieval medicine. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into history, a gentle tap on the like button, a soft subscribe, or even sharing this with a sleepy friend truly helps this little channel keep going. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it for you? Let's begin. The theoretical foundations, a world interconnected. Imagine, if you will, a world where everything felt connected. The way you felt, the things you ate, the stars above your head, even the invisible spirits that might whisper on the wind, all intertwined, influencing your very being. This was the fundamental intellectual framework of medieval medicine, a time when the physical body, celestial movements, and spiritual forces were perceived as mutually influential, a stark contrast to the compartmentalized, reductionist approach of modern medicine that sees everything as separate, distinct systems. There was no single, isolated explanation for illness. Instead, it was a grand, complex puzzle where every piece held a subtle yet profound meaning. The humoral theory, the body's delicate balance. At the very core of medieval medical thought, truly woven into the fabric of daily understanding, was the humoral theory. This wasn't some abstract concept discussed only in dusty scholarly tomes. It was the lens through which every person, from the lowliest peasant to the highest noble, understood their own body and its connection to the world around them. Inherited from the ancient Greek and Roman physicians, this theory posited that the human body comprised four fundamental fluids, or humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. These weren't just liquids, but dynamic essences, each with its own qualities and associations. Blood was believed to be hot and moist, yellow bile hot and dry, black bile cold and dry, and phlegm mole and moist. Good health in this intricate system was believed to depend on a perfect, harmonious balance of these humors. Imagine a delicate scale, constantly in motion, where even the slightest shift could throw everything into disarray. Any excess or deficiency in a particular humor was thought to lead to illness, affecting not only physical well being, but also an individual's very personality. A person with too much yellow bile might be prone to anger and irritability, known as a choleric temperament. Someone with an excess of phlegm might be sluggish and apathetic, a phlegmatic soul. And if your blood ran too high, you might feel an intense, almost feverish energy, perhaps even a buzzing sensation beneath your skin, a restless heat that wouldn't subside. Conversely, a deficiency could manifest as a deep, creeping coldness, a pervasive sense of malaise that settled deep in your bones. Consequently, treatments were meticulously designed to restore this delicate. If you had too much blood, you might undergo bloodletting. If too much phlegm, perhaps purging or inducing vomiting. Imagine lying still, feeling the cool, sharp edge of a knife or phlegm against your skin, the subtle prick, and then the slow, steady warmth as your own vital fluid seeped away, drop by deliberate drop, into a waiting basin. You might feel a growing lightheadedness, a strange detachment, as if a weight were being lifted, or perhaps a terrifying weakness that hinted at a perilous decline. The air around you might take on a faint, coppery scent, mingling with the earthy smell of the straw beneath you, or perhaps a bitter concoction would be pressed to your lips, its foul taste meant to induce a violent purge, leaving you weak and trembling, but with the hope that the offending humor had been expelled. The physical sensations were often profound and immediate, a tangible effort to re engineer the very essence of your being. This wasn't merely a theoretical exercise, it was a visceral, often unpleasant, attempt to realign the inner workings of the human machine, based on a profound, if ultimately flawed, understanding of the body's internal tides. The subtle discomfort of a constant chick, a persistent dampness that seemed to cling to your very lungs, or the unsettling sensation of your own internal heat rising, forcing sweat to bead on your brow. These were the daily manifestations that drove medieval people to seek a humoral rebalancing. Every burp, every cough, every subtle shift in mood was perceived as a message from the humors, urging attention. Astrological influences, the cosmos and the body. But the body was not just an internal landscape, it was also intimately connected to the vast, shimmering expanse of the cosmos. Astrology, far from being a mere superstition, held considerable respect within medieval medicine. Practitioners frequently consulted specialized calendars and intricate star charts, their eyes tracing the paths of celestial bodies across the painted or drawn firmament, believing these movements held vital clues for diagnosis and treatment planning. It was widely believed that the sun, moon, and planets exerted specific influences over distinct parts of the human body. For instance, Aries, that fiery ram, was associated with the head, suggesting headaches or issues of the mind might be linked to its position. Scorpio, the enigmatic scorpion, was intricately linked to the reproductive system, hinting at connections to fertility or ailments of that region. By the 1500s, it even became a legal requirement for European physicians to assess a patient's horoscope before undertaking any medical intervention. The position of planets and lunar phases could dictate the optimal timing for treatments, including the crucial practice of bloodletting. Imagine yourself in a physician's study, late in the evening, the only illumination a flickering oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air is still, perhaps carrying the faint, dry scent of ancient parchment and dust, mingling with a subtle, unidentifiable aroma of dried herbs, or perhaps some unpleasantly pungent preparation. The physician, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously traces lines across a star chart, his finger moving slowly from one constellation to another. You sit quietly, perhaps on a rough wooden bench, feeling a curious blend of awe and apprehension. Your ailment, a persistent, dull ache behind your eyes, seems to him not merely a physical symptom, but a whisper from the heavens, a consequence of Venus being in retrograde, or the moon in a particular phase. The silence in the room is thick, broken only by the soft rustle of the chart as he turns it, or the almost imperceptible creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. You might find yourself staring at the intricate drawings, the mythical beasts and figures, wondering how these distant, shimmering points of light could possibly dictate the timing of a blade against your vein. The cool, heavy weight of the future, determined by cosmic forces, feels almost palpable in the room. This wasn't merely a quaint belief, it was a deeply ingrained worldview, shaping the very rhythm of medical intervention. The chill in the air, the distant hoot of an owl from beyond the window, the soft scratch of the physician's quill if he made a note. These were the subtle sensory details that accompanied a celestial consultation, reinforcing the idea that humanity was but a small part of a grand, interconnected universe, where even the tiniest star held sway over the delicate balance of the body. Spiritual and supernatural beliefs, sickness as divine will. Beyond the earthly humors and the celestial influences, there was another, equally powerful force, believed to govern health and illness, the divine and the supernatural. Sickness was frequently interpreted not as a random biological event, but as a direct divine punishment for sins. In this worldview, the path to cure was often seen as repentance and fervent prayer. Imagine the heavy, echoing silence of a medieval church, broken only by the murmuring prayers of the sick and their families, the faint scent of old stone and lingering incense clinging to the air. The hope that kneeling for hours, repeating endless supplications, could somehow persuade a benevolent yet stern God to lift the burden of illness. Alongside prayer, a myriad of superstitious remedies were employed. Magic stones, polished smooth from generations of handling, would be clutched tight, believed to hold inherent curative properties, Latin curative properties. Charms, small, intricately carved pieces of wood or bone, or perhaps bits of fabric embroidered with protective symbols, would be worn close to the skin, whispering promises of warding off evil spirits believed to cause illness. Religious rites, solemn and ancient, would be performed to formally expel these malevolent entities. Pilgrimages to sacred shrines, long, arduous journeys often undertaken barefoot and in pain, were common practices for those seeking healing. Imagine the aching feet, the dust clinging to your skin, the raw scent of the open road, all endured for the chance to touch a saint's relic, a bone fragment, a piece of clothing, objects believed to possess miraculous curative powers. The king's touch was another such belief, thought to magically heal conditions like scrofula, where hopeful petitioners would line up, waiting for the monarch's healing hand. But the supernatural wasn't always gentle or reverent. Some medicinal preparations were intentionally made to smell and taste utterly repugnant, a deliberate assault on the senses, because the very unpleasantness was believed to ward off malevolent spirit. Imagine a thick, dark liquid, its odor a sickening blend of stale bodily fluids and rotting vegetation forced upon you. The acrid taste would cling to your tongue, burning at the back of your throat, a truly vile experience meant to disgust not only you, but also the unseen evil lurking with the gagging reflex, the tears streaming from your eyes, the desperate shudder. These were all signs that the medicine was working, driving out the insidious, unseen forces that held you captive. The faint, metallic clang of a distant bell, or the rhythmic thump thump of a nearby drum, might accompany these rituals, adding to the pervasive, often unsettling, atmosphere. The holistic framework, an interwoven tapestry. The deep integration of these diverse belief systems, humoral theory, astrological medicine, and spiritual supernatural beliefs reveals that medieval medicine operated within a comprehensive, albeit pre scientific, worldview. These were not isolated or competing paradigms, rather, they were often applied concurrently. For example, astrological charts were routinely used to determine the optimal timing for bloodletting, a practice fundamentally rooted in humoral theory. Further, humoral theory itself was sometimes reinterpreted through a Christian theological lens, linking the four humors to elements, virtues, or even the evangelists, creating an even more complex tapestry of meaning. This intellectual framework, which sought to integrate all perceived influences on health, contrasts sharply with modern medical approaches that meticulously separate the physical from the spiritual, the internal from the external. The truly forgotten aspect here is not merely the individual practices themselves, but the holistic intellectual framework that sought to integrate all perceived influences on health. This integration reflects a pre Enlightenment epistemology where empirical observation, though rudimentary, was interpreted through a lens heavily shaped by ancient philosophy, religious doctrine, and popular superstition, leading to a complex and often contradictory tapestry of healing. Imagine the constant mental work of a medieval physician, holding all these seemingly disparate pieces of knowledge in his mind, trying to reconcile a patient's symptoms with the alignment of Jupiter, the balance of their phlegm, and the possibility of demonic possession. The intellectual effort was immense, even if the conclusion seems strange to us today. The world, in this era, was not a collection of isolated facts, but a deeply interconnected web of forces, and health was merely one thread in that grand, cosmic design. The soft whisper of the wind through a cracked window pane, the faint, persistent drip of water from a leaky roof, the distant muffled sound of church bells marking the hours. These everyday sounds would have underscored the pervasive sense of a world alive with unseen forces, influencing everything, even the humors within one's own fragile body. Diagnosis, the senses as tools. In a world devoid of x rays, MRI scans, or even a basic understanding of germ theory, medieval physicians, despite their theoretical limitations, developed systematic approaches to diagnose ailments. Their primary tools were their own senses, relying heavily on acute observation and the careful interpretation of what they could see, smell, taste, and feel. It was a painstaking, often intimate, process where the smallest detail could hold a profound meaning. Uroscopy, the art of urine examination. One of the most iconic diagnostic methods of the Middle Ages was uroscopy, the meticulous examination of a patient's urine. You'll often see medieval medical illustrations depicting a physician looking thoughtful and sagely, holding a urine flask up to the light, a central symbol of his craft. This wasn't merely a quick glance, it involved a multi-sensory examination. The physician would intently observe its color. Was it clear and pale, hinting at a chill, or dark and cloudy, suggesting deeper internal heat? Was it murky, like pond water, or surprisingly vibrant? Then came the careful, deliberate sniff. What did the urine smell like? Was it pungent, sweet, or subtly sour? Each nuance was a clue, a secret message from the inner workings of the body. And perhaps most startling to our modern sensibilities, the examination often included tasting the urine, a small, brave sip, noting whether it was sweet, a possible sign of what we now know as diabetes, salty, or bitter. Imagine the sheer dedication, or perhaps the hardened resignation, required for such an act. A notable diagnostic innovation that speaks to their drive for standardization was the urine. This was a circular diagram, often elaborately illustrated, that helped practitioners correlate specific urine characteristics, its hue, its sediment, its scent, its taste with 20 different ailments. It was a visual aid, a complex map designed to guide the physician through the myriad possibilities suggested by the patient's bodily fluid. Imagine the physician's finger tracing the lines on the wheel, comparing the shade in the flask to the subtle variations depicted, trying to pinpoint the exact category of imbalance. The light in the room, perhaps dim and smoky from a nearby hearth, would play across the parchment of the wheel, making its intricate details shimmer slightly. The silence, broken only by the occasional distant crow or the gentle thump of a foot on a wooden floor, would underscore the gravity of the diagnostic process. This systematic approach, however flawed its underlying theory, was a conscious effort to bring order and repeatable methods to the chaotic landscape of illness. It was a testament to an early form of data collection and categorization, attempting to make the subjective observable and therefore understandable. The patient, watching this meticulous ritual, would likely feel a strange mix of hope and profound discomfort, knowing their deepest internal workings were being laid bare for interpretation through such unconventional means. Pulse diagnosis, the rhythm of another critical component of their assessment, one that relied on the physician's finely tuned sense of touch, was pulse diagnosis. Before any drastic interventions, the physician would gently take your wrist, his fingers resting lightly but intently on your radial artery. As early as the 6th century, the scholar Cassiodorus noted that for a skilled physician, the pulsing of the veins reveals to his fingers the patient's ailment. It was believed that the quality of the pulse, its strength, its rhythm, its speed, its very feel could tell a story of internal states, reflecting the balance or imbalance of the humors within. Was it a strong, bounding pulse, suggesting an excess of blood and heat, or a weak, thready one, indicating a depletion of vital forces? Imagine the physician's quiet concentration, his eyes perhaps closed for a moment, focusing entirely on the subtle thrumming beneath his fingertips. The air in the room might be cool, or perhaps thick with the scent of burning herbs, but his focus would be solely on the delicate, rhythmic beat of your life force. You would feel the gentle pressure of his fingers, the warmth of his hand, and the steady, unwavering attention he gave to this fundamental rhythm. There might be a slight tension in your own body, a quiet hope that his touch would reveal the path to your recovery. The sounds in the background, perhaps the distant, muffled calls of street vendors or the quiet scratching of a mouse behind the wall, would fade into insignificance as this intimate, almost meditative, diagnostic moment unfolded. This reliance on the subtle language of the body, interpreted through highly developed sensory perception, highlights a profound connection between the medieval practitioner and their patients, a connection that sometimes feels lost in the age of impersonal medical machines. General observation and patient history, the human story. Before proceeding with these more specialized examinations, medieval doctors, much like doctors today, would first engage in the fundamental acts of observation and history taking. They would observe the patient's general condition, the pallor of their inn, the sheen of sweat on their brow, the dullness or brightness in their eyes, the overall posture, the subtle tremors of a weak hand. They would note whether the patient seemed restless or lethargic, whether their breathing was shallow or labored. Every visible sign, every minute detail of physical presentation was a piece of the diagnostic puzzle. Then, they would listen attentively to their complaint. This involved not just hearing the words, but sensing the underlying distress, The precise nuance of a described ache, the location and intensity of a sharp pain, the duration of a persistent cough, or the relentless nature of a fever. Imagine the patient, perhaps frail and weary, recounting their symptoms, trying to articulate the indescribable discomfort that had settled within their body. The physician, sitting quietly, would listen to the cadence of their voice, perhaps noting if it was weak or raspy, if their words were halting or rushed. This initial reliance on subjective patient history and objective visual cues as foundational diagnostic steps underscores a crucial truth. Even without advanced technology, the human story of suffering, combined with careful visual assessment, remain the starting point for any attempt at healing. The gentle flicker of a candle might illuminate the patient's face as they spoke, revealing shadows under their eyes, emphasizing the depth of their suffering. The faint, persistent scent of illness, a mix of unwashed linen and stale air, would fill the small space. Early empirical attempts, the forgotten curiosity, the emergence of empirical observation within a pre scientific paradigm is strikingly evident in these diagnostic practices. While medieval medicine undeniably lacked germ theory and advanced diagnostic technologies, practices like uroscopy and pulse diagnosis represent early, systematic attempts at empirical observation and data collection. The development of the urine wheel is particularly significant as it demonstrates a conscious, almost academic, effort to standardize diagnosis through observable, quantifiable, even if superficially so, characteristics. This suggests an underlying drive for objective diagnostic methods, despite the ultimately flawed theoretical framework, humoral theory, that informed their interpretation. This indicates that medieval practitioners were not merely relying on superstition or blind adherence to ancient texts. They were actively engaged in a nascent form of scientific inquiry, attempting to establish correlations between observable symptoms and internal state. The truly forgotten aspect here is not just the specific, rudimentary methods themselves, but the intellectual curiosity and systematic approach to patient assessment that underpin them. These early attempts at empirical data collection, however limited, laid some conceptual groundwork for later, more scientifically rigorous diagnostic advancements. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of a physician when a particular urine characteristic perfectly matched a segment on his urine wheel, feeling as though he had unlocked a tiny secret of the universe. This drive to observe, categorize, and understand, however imperfectly, was a subtle but profound current running through medieval medical practice, a quiet yearning for knowledge in a world full of mystery. The rustle of paper, the soft tap of a finger on a diagram, the murmur of calculation, these were the sounds of early scientific thought, a quiet dedication to unraveling the body's hidden truths. Therapeutic approaches, a tapestry of cures. Having peered into the diagnostic methods, let's now turn our gentle gaze to the ways medieval practitioners sought to heal. Their therapeutic approaches were a wonderfully diverse blend of herbal remedies drawn from nature's bounty, surgical interventions that were often brutal, yet sometimes surprisingly effective, and a collection of more unconventional, even bizarre, methods. It truly showcases both pragmatic ingenuity and the profound limitations of their scientific understanding in a world without antibiotics or sterile environments. Herbalism and folk remedies, nature's pharmacy. Medicinal plants were of paramount importance in medieval healing, forming the very backbone of daily medical practice. Some lawn-stick gardens, quiet and ordered sanctuaries within the bustling chaos of the age, were specifically dedicated to cultivating these vital herbs. Their carefully tended rows, brimming with light, offered a subtle, complex scent of damp earth, mint, and hidden florals, a stark contrast to the often foul odors of the outside world. Sick individuals, whether humble peasants or weary travelers, would seek these herbs from monasteries, local herbalists with their weathered hands and deep knowledge of the land, or from the burgeoning apothecary, whose shops would be filled with the dry, potent aromas of countless plant remedies. Let's delve into some specific examples, letting our senses paint a picture of these ancient cures. Imagine the delicate, almost citrusy scent of chamomile infusion, steeping slowly in a rough clay cup, its warmth seeping into chilled hands, promising gentle relief from the fever's heat and the deep aches of swelling. Or consider the sharp, invigorating sting of fresh nettles. Applied directly to aching joints, you might feel an immediate, biting sensation, followed by a deeper, almost radiating warmth as the nettles supposedly drew out the pain and inflammation. The slightly metallic scent of bruised leaves would fill the air around you. Then there was waybroad, commonly known as plantain. Its broad leaves, often found growing in dusty pathways, would be crushed and applied as a cool, damp poultice to ulcers or fresh cuts. Imagine the immediate soothing sensation as the cool, green paste met inflamed skin, offering a moment of quiet relief. Its earthy, slightly bitter scent would rise as it warmed on the skin. Watercress, sharp and peppery, might be eaten raw or brewed into an infusion, a panacea for everything from the common flu to the more embarrassing issue of baldness. Its pungent taste would linger, a constant reminder of its supposed healing power. Yarrow, with its feathery leaves and distinctive scent, was a crucial herb for staunching bleeding and treating wounds. Imagine the earthy, slightly sweet aroma of dried yarrow, packed tightly into a fresh wound, the hope that it would slow the vital crimson flow, allowing the body to begin its own healing process. Mugwort, with its strong, almost mystical aroma, might be burned in smudging rituals to cleanse areas of bad spirits, its smoke curling gently upwards, filling the air with a slightly acrid, herbaceous scent. Or perhaps it was consumed as an infusion, its calming effects sought for digestive issues, or even as a crude anesthetic during childbirth. The quiet, rhythmic sound of a crackling fire as herbs smoldered, the soft rustle of leaves as a poultice was prepared. These were the subtle accompaniments to the ancient art of herbalism. Intriguingly, archaeological evidence from Sweden indicates Vikings cultivated hemp to produce CBD oils and creams for pain relief, with cannabis sativa seeds found in graves suggesting their use in pain relieving balm. Imagine the subtle, earthy, almost resinous scent of a hemp balm, gently massaged into aching muscles after a long day of strenuous labor, offering a quiet respite from chronic pain, a gentle warmth seeping into tired limbs. Other common ingredients filling the apothecary's shelves would include fragrant sage, rosemary, thyme, bay, and mint. Walwort, henbane, betony, and comfrey were also staples, each with its own specific use. Even international trade networks played their part, introducing exotic spices like cumin, pepper, and ginger into medicinal formulations, their rich aromas mingling with the more familiar scents of local plants. Herbal remedies were prepared in various forms, each designed for specific ailments and applications. Infusions or medicinal teas were made by steeping herbs in hot water, their warm, often earthy aromas rising gently. Poultices, a common sight, involved crushing herbs and applying them directly to wounds or inflamed areas, the damp, cool paste offering immediate topical relief. Salves were created by combining herbs with fats or oils, creating a thicker, more emollient preparation for topical application, their greasiness a tactile sensation on the skin. Inhalants involved breathing in vapors from heated herbs, the potent fumes, clearing congested passages, and as mentioned, smudging, the burning of specific herbs, was also practiced to cleanse areas of bad spirits, the fragrant smoke twisting and turning as it ascended, carrying away perceived malevolence. What's truly fascinating is that some medieval herbal remedies remain effective and are still used in modern herbalism today. Modern scientific tests have even validated the efficacy of certain medieval remedies, such as an eye ointment recipe, showing that practical observation often stumbled upon genuine efficacy, even without theoretical understanding. Honey, for instance, was widely recognized and used as a natural antiseptic. Imagine the thick, golden sweetness of honey, spread carefully over an open wound, its sticky texture and cloying sweetness a stark contrast to the pain beneath. And a simple combination of vinegar and honey was found to be an effective antiseptic too. Even wine, with its inherent antiseptic properties, was routinely used to clean wounds. The sharp, alcoholic sting as it touched raw flesh, the faint, fruity aroma mixing with the smell of blood, these were the basic, yet often effective, tools against infection. The soft rustle of leaves, the gentle bubbling of water over a fire, the thump of a mortar and pestle, these were the quiet, constant sounds of medieval herbal healing. Surgical interventions, crude skill and desperate hope. Medieval surgery, though often crude and brutal by modern standards, was actively practiced, demonstrating a surprising degree of pragmatic skill given the limitations of the era. Common procedures included urgent amputations, performed to save a life from a spreading infection or a hopelessly shattered limb. Imagine the terrible, jarring sound of a bone saw, the sickening crunch and tear, the raw, searing pain that would momentarily overwhelm all other senses, even with rudimentary pain dullers. Setting broken bones was also common, requiring a strong, steady hand and a keen understanding of anatomy, often accompanied by the sharp crack of bone as it was manipulated back into place. Replacing dislocations, binding wounds with rough bandages, and attempting to remove lodged foreign objects were also daily tasks. Skeletal studies of Vikings, those formidable warriors often associated with strength and resilience, show clear evidence of ancient techniques to fix fractured limbs, sometimes involving manipulation that must have caused excruciating pain. Wounds, whether from battle or accident, were routinely cleaned with wine, which acted as an antiseptic, its sharp, slightly sour smell mixing with the metallic tang of egg whites were also ingeniously used to seal wounds and prevent infection, forming a delicate, protective film over raw flesh. One of the most ancient and widespread surgical interventions, often striking fear and fascination into modern observers, was trepanning. This involved the deliberate drilling or scraping of a hole into the human skull. Its purpose was multifaceted. It was believed to relieve intracranial pressure from injuries, perhaps alleviating the dull, throbbing ache of a skull fracture. It was also performed to cure mental health problems, as if a hole in the skull could release the unseen demons of the mind. Indeed, a pervasive belief was that it could quite literally release evil spirits from those thought to be possessed. The quiet whir of the drill, a prelude to spiritual liberation. Beyond the mystical, it also served as emergency surgery after severe head wounds to remove shattered bone fragments and pooled blood that would otherwise cause fatal pressure on the brain. A sharp, rounded instrument called a trephine was typically used, its metal glinting in the dim light, the soft rasping sound as it began to bite into bone. Surprisingly, archaeological evidence suggests surprisingly high survival rates in some regions. For instance, 7 out of 8 skulls from 6th 8th century Germany showed clear signs of healing and survival post trepanation, indicating that many patients actually endured the ordeal and lived for some time afterward. Globally, early survival rates were around 40%, improving to an astonishing 80% by the 16th, 17th centuries, a testament to the developing skill of these early surgeons and the remarkable resilience of the human body. In the brutal world of the Viking Age, healers, often women, played a crucial and often overlooked role. They accompanied Viking warriors on their expeditions, essentially operating field hospitals in the immediate aftermath of skirmishes. Their duties included sewing gaping wounds, the precise, often painstaking work of closing ravaged flesh. They set bones with a practiced, firm touch and performed rudimentary surgery on the battlefield. They had access to their precious herbal treatments for pain, swelling, and infection, providing what little comfort they could. Attempts were also made to remove lodged spearheads or shrapnel, a highly risky procedure where success was often a matter of sheer luck and a steady hand amidst desperate circumstances. The metallic scent of blood would be everywhere, mingling with the earthy smell of damp soil and fear. The air would be filled with the groans of the wounded, the hushed instructions of the healer, and the quiet, almost rhythmic sounds of simple surgical tools at work. Bizarre and controversial practices, the unconventional and dangerous. Beyond the pragmatic, and sometimes brutal, there existed a realm of practices that, to our modern minds, appear truly bizarre, even alarming. Yet, for medieval people, these were often mainstream, accepted, and deeply rooted in their understanding of the body and disease. Bloodletting was perhaps the most pervasive and common practice, a cornerstone of humoral theory. Its primary aim was to remove excess blood, which was believed to cause illness, acting as a pressure release valve for the body's internal fluids. This was achieved through various means. Sometimes live leeches would be applied to the body, their soft, segmented forms slowly engorging with blood, a strange, creeping sensation on the skin, leaving behind a subtle, lingering it. More directly, through venesection, a doctor would open a vein, often in the arm, ankle, or forehead, with a specialized, sharp knife called a fleam. Imagine the cool, chilling glint of the fleam in the dim light, the slight pressure, then the sharp prick, and the subsequent warm, sticky gush of blood into a basin held below. Cupping vessels, heated to create a vacuum, were also used to draw blood to the surface, creating a tight, pulling sensation on the skin before the incisions were made. This widespread practice was believed to treat an extensive range of conditions, from the devastating plague and smallpox to chronic ailments like epilepsy and gout. Some individuals even underwent regular bloodletting as a preventative measure, believing it maintained health and warded off future illness, a sort bodily spring cleaning. Despite its widespread use, Bloodletting was an inherently dangerous practice that could lead to severe weakening, profound anemia, or even death from excessive blood loss. Imagine the growing lightheadedness, the feeling of cold sweat breaking out on your skin, the subtle ringing in your ears as your own vital fluid drained away, leaving you profoundly weakened, yet with the desperate hope that this weakness was a sign of impending recovery. The coppery, metallic scent of blood would fill the air, a constant reminder of the procedure. Then there was maggot therapy. This seemingly unconventional practice involved the intentional application of live maggots to wounds. Their purpose was incredibly pragmatic and effective: to consume infected dead flesh, thereby cleaning the wound and promoting the healing process. Imagine the unsettling sight of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of tiny white maggots wriggling and squirming on an open wound, the faint, almost imperceptible rustle as they tirelessly went about their work, the strange sensation on the skin, both alien and, perhaps, surprisingly cleansing as they debrided the decaying tissue. What's truly remarkable is that this practice, so medieval in its directness, is still utilized in modern medicine today for the debridement of ulcerous wounds, a testament to its enduring, if surprising, efficacy. Perhaps one of the most truly bizarre practices was the consumption of mummy powder. This involved the ingestion of ground up desiccated human bodies, a practice that originated from an erroneous translation of bitumen, a natural mineral pitch, as mummia. The demand for this macabre remedy was so high that apothecaries would sometimes resort to stealing corpses, chopping them into pieces, and then drying them in kilns to meet the market's need for mummy. Imagine the gritty, unpleasant texture of this dark powder, the faint, disturbing smell of decay that could never be truly masked, no matter how much it was mixed with other suns, the psychological discomfort of knowingly consuming human remains, a profound transgression in any other context, highlights the sheer desperation for a cure in a world riddled with unexplained diseases. The dry, dusty scent of the powder, the peculiar, almost chalky taste. These would be the sensory experiences of a truly desperate act of healing. And then there were dung ointments. These were poultices made from animal excrement, and sometimes even human feces mixed with ingredients such as eggs, lard, or wax, and then applied directly to infected wounds. Imagine the overwhelmingly repulsive smell of raw animal dung, perhaps mixed with the faint odor of rancid fat as it was prepared. Then the warm, soft, yet deeply unsettling feel of this foul smelling concoction being spread onto an open, throbbing wound. The initial revulsion, the gagging reflex, would be overcome only by the desperate hope that such a vile substance could bring healing. Surprisingly, this truly repulsive remedy was sometimes effective. The feces contained microbacteria that, unbeknownst to the medieval practitioners, could act on infections in a manner similar to antibiotics, an accidental discovery of what we now understand as microbial action. The subtle squelching sound as the poultice was applied, the persistent, heavy scent, the strange mix of disgust and hope. These were the realities of a truly dirty, yet sometimes effective treatment. Anesthesia and pain management, a fragile reprieve. The agony of medieval surgical procedures is almost unimaginable to us today. Yet practitioners did attempt to manage pain, however crudely. Early attempts at pain management included the use of opium as an anesthetic during surgical procedures. Imagine the sweet, cloying scent of opium, a thick, dark resin, perhaps heated slightly to release its potent fumes, promising oblivion from the searing pain, the slow, heavy feeling of a creeping drowsiness, a blurring of the senses, a fragile reprieve from the terror of the knife. A more potent, and often lethal, anesthetic concoction was known as Dewal. Its ingredients painted a grim picture: pig's bile, with its bitter, sickly smell; hemlock juice, a deadly poison; lettuce, for its mild sedative properties; opium, to dull the pain; and vinegar, adding an acidic taint. These were often mixed with large amounts of wine, not just to make it more palatable, but to increase its sedative properties, dulling the senses even further. Imagine the acrid, bitter taste of Duval as it was forced down, followed by a dizzying rush as consciousness began to recede, a terrifying descent into unconsciousness, or worse, a permanent slumber from which one might never wake. The air would be thick with the smells of the concoction, mingled with the faint, unsettling scent of fear. Mandragora, or mandraga, a plant steeped in folklore and mystery, was also employed to induce sleep or dull pain during operations. Its roots, often said to resemble a human figure, were believed to possess powerful narcotic properties. Imagine the earthy, slightly narcotic scent of mandragora, perhaps brewed into a tea that tastes bitter and strange, followed by a heavy, dreamless sleep, a profound unconsciousness that offered the only escape from the brutality of medieval surgery. The soft, shallow breathing of the patient, the quiet tension in the room, these were the only signs of life during these desperate attempts at pain relief. Pragmatism amidst the unconventional. While some medieval practices appear bizarre or purely superstitious, the evidence highlights a significant number of pragmatic, empirically derived treatments. Herbalism, supported by multiple sources, often had genuine efficacy, proving that close observation of nature could yield powerful results even without a scientific understanding of their mechanisms. The use of wine and honey as antiseptics for wound care demonstrates practical observation of beneficial outcomes, as practitioners noticed wounds cleaned with these substances healed better. Most strikingly, maggot therapy and dung ointments were employed for wound cleaning and infection control, with modern science validating their unexpected antibiotic like properties, revealing an accidental genius. The surprising survival rates for trepanning also suggest a degree of surgical skill and patient resilience that belies the apparent crudeness of the procedure. This challenges the simplistic, often pejorative, view of medieval medicine as uniformly ineffective or irrational. It reveals a sophisticated, albeit pre scientific, trial and error approach where observations of what worked, even if the underlying mechanisms were unknown, led to the retention and refinement of surprisingly effective treatments. The forgotten aspect here is not just the methods themselves, but the ingenuity and adaptability of practitioners who, despite lacking germ theory, leveraged natural resources and accidental discoveries to address severe health challenges. This underscores a resilience and practical intelligence often overlooked in historical accounts. The constant, quiet hum of life, the rustle of straw, the distant bleating of sheep, these were the everyday sounds that formed the backdrop to a persistent human quest for healing, a testament to ingenuity born of necessity. The Viking Age, a case study in harsh reality. Now, let us shift our gentle gaze from the broader landscape of medieval medicine to a specific, compelling case study: the Viking Age. spanning roughly from 800 to 150 AD. This era offers a profound glimpse into medieval health and medical practices, revealing a reality often at odds with popular perceptions of robust, invincible warriors. Forget the romanticized image of towering, healthy figures. The archaeological evidence paints a far more nuanced and often grim picture of daily existence and the pervasive struggle against illness, common ailments and diseases, the unseen struggles. Modern computed tomography, CT scans of Viking Age skulls have revealed widespread evidence of disease among the population, stripping away the heroic facade to expose the stark reality of their health. Severe dental and maxillofacial diseases were prevalent, including pervasive dental caries, which are cavities, along with periodontal disease and periapical infections. Imagine the constant, dull throb of a decaying tooth, or the sharp, radiating pain of an abscess that would make eating a torment and sleep a struggle. Over a quarter of the Viking population suffered from tooth decay, and many individuals had multiple missing teeth, sometimes only a couple remaining by the time of death. There is also evidence of some rudimentary attempts at dentistry, though one can only imagine the agony involved in such procedures in an age without effective anesthetic. The metallic taste of infection, the constant sensitivity to hot or cold, the inability to truly chew food. These were daily realities. Signs of chronic sinus and ear infections were also common, leaving telltale traces in adjacent bone structures. Imagine the persistent, heavy pressure behind your eyes, the dull throb in your ears, the constant, low grade discomfort of a chronic infection, perhaps accompanied by a subtle buzzing or ringing that never truly subsided. Osteoarthritis, a condition causing painful stiffness and swelling in joints, was widespread among ordinary Viking farmers, particularly affecting the back, hands, and knees. This was an almost inevitable consequence of the strenuous physical labor involved in their agrarian lifestyle. The constant bending, lifting, and repetitive motions of farming, creating a pervasive grinding pain that would slowly erode their mobility and comfort. Other skeletal conditions and pathological bone growths were also frequently identified in their remains. Further skeletal evidence points to porotic hyperostosis, which manifests as spongy or porous bone tissue in the cranium. This indicated widespread anemia among the Viking population, though not necessarily just iron deficiency anemia, suggesting other underlying gastrointestinal conditions or dietary deficiencies. Imagine a constant feeling of profound fatigue, a persistent weakness, a dull headache that seemed to cling to you like a shadow, scurvy, a debilitating disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, was also identified in at least one individual, revealing another facet of their nutritional struggles. Perhaps most chillingly, DNA analysis from various burial sites across Europe has shown that many Viking skeletons were carriers of the smallpox virus, found in 11 burial sites. This suggests they played a role in spreading the deadly disease during their extensive journeys, unknowingly carrying death in their wake. Leprosy and dysentery were also present in the Norse Age, contributing to the burden of disease. Despite what appears to have been a generally balanced and varied diet, osteological evidence indicates that nutritional deficiencies still plagued significant portions of the population, and unsettlingly, toxic herbs were also found in their stomachs for unknown reasons, potentially causing further illness. The pervasive issue of contaminated water was a constant source of health problems, leading to the regular consumption of ale and mead as safer alternatives, making daily hydration a choice between thirst and potential sickness. The faint, persistent scent of stale ale, consumed not for pleasure but for survival, would have been a common aroma in Viking settlement. The stark reality revealed by these archaeological findings: widespread chronic diseases, severe dental issues, skeletal ailments like osteoarthritis, and pervasive parasitic infections, paints a starkly different picture from the popular stereotype of exceptionally robust and healthy Vikings. Their average life expectancy was remarkably short. Even their hygiene practices, while arguably better than some contemporaries, were insufficient to prevent widespread disease due to the fundamental lack of germ theory. This highlights the harsh reality of daily health struggles for the average Viking, underscoring the profound limitations of pre-modern medicine and public health, even for a society renowned for its physical prowess and expansive explorations. The metallic tang of illness, the constant ache of joints, the gnawing discomfort of parasites, these were the unseen burdens of a Viking's life, leading to the quiet, subtle groan of discomfort, a sigh of resignation that was almost as constant as the wind over the fjords. Viking medical practices and hygiene, a surprising cleanliness. Despite the grim reality of widespread illness, the Vikings were not without their attempts at healing, often blending pragmatic herbal knowledge with spiritual belief. They utilized a variety of local herbs for remedies, deeply understanding the flora around them. Specific examples include yarrow, used to staunch bleeding from wounds, net, applied for joint pain and inflammation, mugwort, for digestive issues and perhaps even as an anesthetic during childbirth, and plantain, for cuts and insect bites, known for its antiseptic properties. As we've gently explored, hemp or cannabis sativa was notably used for pain relief, with archaeological finds of seeds and burial pouches attesting to its import. Norse healing often combined this herbal knowledge with spiritual practices, reflecting the deep integration of belief systems we discussed earlier. Incantations, whispered charms, or offerings to supernatural forces were common, as disease was believed to be significantly impacted by unseen spirits, particularly ancestral spirits. Imagine the rhythmic chanting of an incantation, the scent of burning herbs mixing with the cold, damp air of a long house, a desperate plea to unseen powers. Evidence also suggests practical surgical skills, including the setting of broken bones, rudimentary surgery, meticulously sewing wounds with sturdy thread and needle, and the danger, often agonizing attempt to remove shrapnel from battle injuries. Women healers, known as Villir or Leknaskanor, played a crucial role, often accompanying warriors to operate what amounted to rudimentary field hospitals, guiding childbirth, and providing the primary source of daily health care for the majority of the population. Here's a curious contrast to popular stereotypes. Vikings were notably conscious of cleanliness and took considerable pride in personal hygiene. This might surprise those who picture them as perpetually grubby. Anglo-Saxon chroniclers, often astonished by the cleanliness of their Norse neighbors, recorded their daily washing and their dedication of Saturdays to bathing and washing clothes. The Old Norse word for Saturday, logardagar, literally translates to bathing day, a beautiful linguistic testament to this practice. Imagine the steam rising from a communal bath, the sound of splashing water, and the subtle, clean scent of lye soap, a rare pleasure in a harsh world. They crafted homemade lye soap from animal fats and wood ash, sometimes infusing it with fragrant herbs like thyme or mint, adding a subtle, refreshing aroma to their cleansing rituals. Grooming tools such as combs, often intricately carved from bone or antler, along with tweezers and ear picks, were commonly used, found in many archaeological digs, highlighting a concern for personal grooming that extended beyond mere necessity. For waste management, They utilized pit latrines, crude but effective, and some Viking era settlements like Jorvik, modern day York, even had remnants of rudimentary toilet seats and basic sewerage systems, indicating an attempt at organized sanitation. Human refuse, far from being merely waste, was practically reused as fertilizer for agriculture, demonstrating a circular economy of resources. However, despite these efforts, the dense populations in trading towns often led to poor sanitary conditions, which unfortunately contributed to the spread of diseases like parasites. Imagine the pervasive, heavy smell of human waste that would still cling to the air in crowded urban settlements, a constant background aroma to daily life. Even with attempts at management, the feeling of grit and dust clinging to skin and clothes, despite regular bathing. This paradox, a conscious effort for personal hygiene contrasted with persistent public health challenges, underscores the profound limitations of cleanliness without an understanding of invisible germs. The persistent buzz of flies, the subtle, cloying scent of refuse, the constant reminder of pervasive unsanitary conditions, even for a people who valued cleanliness. Life expectancy and causes of death, a short, hard life. Life expectancy during the Viking Age was tragically short, a stark reflection of the harsh realities of their existence. It averaged around 30-50 years, with very high infant mortality rates significantly impacting the overall lifespan. While many children did not survive infancy, those who made it past childhood had a somewhat better chance of reaching 50 or beyond, though still a relatively short life compared to today. Less than 2% of the population, a truly tiny fraction, managed to reach the venerable age of 60. Common causes of death included disease and infections, which, without modern medicine and antibiotics, could be fatal and persist for long, agonizing periods. Pneumonia, with its shallow, rattling breath and racking cough, was a particularly significant cause of death, often exacerbated by the biting cold and dampness of their living conditions. Severely inflamed wounds, throbbing with heat and often carrying a sickening scent of infection, were equally deadly. Imagine the constant, quiet anxiety surrounding any injury, knowing a simple cut could quickly spiral into a fatal blood poisoning, the constant cough of a comrade in the longhouse, the low groan of someone consumed by fever. These were the daily sounds of a life lived on the brink of widespread illness. Injuries and warfare, particularly from combat and raids, were a significant cause of death for Viking men, as evidenced by rune stones commemorating the fallen and skeletal remains bearing severe cut marks and brutal fractures. Imagine the sharp, sickening thwack of an axe, the chilling clang of metal on metal, the agonizing scream of a fallen warrior. For women, childbirth was a perilous and highly dangerous period, especially if they became pregnant in their mid teens or later in life, making each birth a life or death gamble. The harsh living conditions, the biting cold of long winters, recurrent food shortages that gnawed at their strength, and the demanding nature of physical labor, whether farming the unforgiving land or building mighty longships, all took a significant toll on the body and contributed to shorter lifespans. Environmental factors, specifically droughts that decimated crops and led to scarcity, and widespread epidemics that swept through communities, also played a crucial role in the decline of Viking settlements in regions like Greenland. The silence that would fall over a village decimated by plague, the quiet despair of empty homes, was a profound testament to nature's unforgiving power. The intricate interplay of environment, lifestyle, and disease in the Viking Age is clearly demonstrated by this detailed evidence. The agrarian existence of the Vikings directly led to musculoskeletal issues like arthritis from back-breaking farm work. Living in close proximity to animals in dense populations and trading towns contributed to poor sanitation and widespread parasitic infections. Dietary factors, including contaminated water and nutritional deficiencies despite a generally balanced diet, also played a role in their ailments. Furthermore, climate change, specifically drought, impacted food resources and led to epidemics, forcing migrations and further hardship. This demonstrates a strong cause and effect relationship between the specific environmental conditions, daily routines, and subsistence strategies of the Viking Age people and the diseases and health challenges they faced. It reinforces the understanding that in pre modern societies, health outcomes were inextricably linked to and largely determined by their immediate natural and built environments. The persistent dull ache in the joint, the unseen irritation of parasites, the constant fear of sudden illness or injury, these were the silent, everyday burdens of a Viking life, underscoring their quiet determination to simply endure. The practitioners, a multi-tiered system. Pew. Having journeyed through the theories of disease and the harsh realities of health, let's now turn our gaze to the diverse array of individuals who actually provided health care in the Middle Ages. It was a deeply stratified system, with each type of practitioner occupying a distinct role within the societal hierarchy and contributing to a multi-tiered, often unequal, system of care. From the learned scholar to the humble midwife, each played a vital, yet often unacknowledged, role. Physicians and barber surgeons, the educated and the practical. At the pinnacle of medieval medical practice, serving primarily the nobility and upper classes, were the physicians. These were formally educated scholars who received their rigorous training at the nascent universities of the era. Their practice was deeply rooted in the classical Greek tradition, primarily based on the voluminous theories of ancient scholars like Hippocrates and Galen. To be certified, a student had to demonstrate mastery through demanding recitation, authoritative lecturing, and complex debate, showcasing their intellectual prowess rather than their practical skill. Imagine the quiet, hushed atmosphere of a university lecture hall, the scratching of quills on parchment, the faint, dry scent of old books and scholarly debate hanging in the air. The physician, often aloof and intellectual, would deliberate over Latin texts, seeking to understand the humors through abstract. In stark contrast to the academically focused physicians came the barber surgeons. These were working class practitioners, often associated with the guilds of barbers, who performed the practical, often messy, medical tasks that were considered beneath the more academic and refined physicians. Their common procedures were extensive and often brutal, widespread bloodletting, performed with their fleams or through the application of leeches. They were the ones who would perform tooth extractions, the sharp snap of a pulled tooth echoing in their rough shop. Most surgical operations, from relatively minor hernia repairs to the more complex procedures for gallstones and even terrifying cesarean sections, fell to their lot. Imagine the sharp, metallic tang of blood in a barber surgeon's dimly lit shop, mingling with the faint, soapy scent of their primary trade. The air would often be filled with the muffled cries of pain, the coarse instructions of the surgeon, and the clatter of simple, unsterile tools. Their hands, often stained with blood and dirt, were calloused and firm from years of practical work, yet capable of surprisingly precise movements when cutting or stitching. They gained extensive practical experience due to the frequent wars of the era, where battlefield injuries provided a brutal but effective training ground. This highlights a distinct class divide in medieval medicine: abstract theory for the elite, raw pragmatism for the masses. Monks and monastic infirmaries, sanctuary and knowledge. The church played a dominant and profoundly influential role in medieval medicine, shaping not only the understanding of sickness, but also the provision of care. Sickness, as we've discussed, was frequently interpreted as a divine punishment for sins, intertwining spiritual and physical suffering. Monks were often among the very few literate individuals in a largely illiterate society, and they played a crucial, painstaking role in preserving ancient medical texts by diligently copying manuscripts of Greek and Latin authors. Imagine the quiet, rhythmic scratching of a monk's quill in a monastic scriptorium, the faint scent of ink and aged parchment, as he meticulously transcribed invaluable medical knowledge day after day, year after year. Monasteries, these self contained islands of learning and devotion, typically maintained infirmaries for their sick and elderly members, offering a sanctuary of quiet care. Beyond their own, they extended care to the poor, to weary travelers, and to pious pilgrims who sought assistance and healing within their hallowed walls. These infirmaries were often serene places, filled with the soft scent of beeswax candles and the faint, earthy aroma of medicinal. Monks also diligently cultivated medicinal plants in their well ordered gardens, transforming raw botanical material into remedies for the ailing. Some monks, through their skill and dedication, achieved significant reputations as healers, attracting lay patients from beyond the monastic walls and sometimes even leading to the establishment of hospitals separate from monastic infirmaries. These monastic infirmaries are indeed considered crucial precursors to the modern hospital system we recognize today, laying a quiet, often unacknowledged, foundation for institutionalized care. The gentle murmur of prayer, the hushed footsteps of a caregiver, the distant peal of a bell marking the hours, these were the sounds that permeated the healing spaces of the monasteries, a blend of spiritual comfort and practical care. Folk healers, midwives, and nurses, the unsung heroes, while formally educated physicians catered to the elite, and barber surgeons handled the more direct physical interventions. The vast majority of the population, particularly the common folk in rural communities, relied on local healers. These practitioners, often women, typically lacked formal education in the university sense, but they possessed a wealth of practical knowledge about local plants, time honored home remedies, and traditional healing practices passed down through generations. Their practices varied significantly by region, drawing upon the specific flora and folklore of their local environment. Imagine the earthy, slightly mysterious scent of a folk healer's dwelling, filled with drying herbs hanging from rafters, strange concoctions simmering gently over a low fire, and the comforting yet often firm touch of a woman who knew the ways of the land and the body. Among these essential, often unacknowledged caregivers were the midwives, who played an indispensable role in childbirth and the care of childhood ailments. Their knowledge was primarily acquired not through books, but through direct apprenticeship to older, more experienced midwives, a silent, powerful lineage of practical wisdom. Imagine the quiet, comforting presence of a midwife during the agonizing hours of childbirth, her whispered words of encouragement, her steady hands guiding new life into the world. the heavy scent of sweat and effort filling the small room. Nurses, often women, provided basic care to the ill in the emerging hospitals, frequently joining monastic orders dedicated to charity and service. Secular nursing orders also emerged, particularly during the terrifying major health crises like the Black Death, where the need for care was overwhelming. Noble born women who dedicated themselves to caring for the poor or sick were sometimes revered as nursing saints, their acts of compassion offering a beacon of hope in a dark age. Imagine the endless quiet tasks of a nurse, changing soiled linens, bringing small sips of water, gently sponging fevered brows, listening to the soft groans of the suffering, offering what little comfort they could. Owen, largely unremarked and without formal recognition. The persistent, heavy smell of illness and disinfectant, perhaps vinegar, would cling to their clothing. However, while women provided essential widespread healthcare services to the vast majority of the population, their labor was often invisible in official historical records, accounting for a very small percentage of licensed practitioners. Informal social networks allowed women to practice medicine and share their wisdom, forming a crucial, yet largely unrecorded, system of community care. Yet, despite their vital contributions, they sometimes faced mockery or insidious accusations of witchcraft from male chroniclers in the emerging male dominated medical establishment. Systemic inequalities and unacknowledged contributions. This clearly delineates a multi tiered healthcare system in the Middle Ages. Formally educated physicians served the elite, their knowledge encased in Latin texts and theoretical debate. Working class barber surgeons handled practical procedures for a broader, but still paying, clientele, their hands calloused and their skills honed by necessity. The vast majority of the population, however, relied on local, often female, folk healers and midwives whose knowledge was practical, community based, and passed down through generations. The invisibility of women in official records, despite their vital contributions, coupled with instances of mockery or insidious accusations of witchcraft, highlights a profound social and gender bias inherent in the medieval system. This reveals that access to different levels and types of medical care was heavily stratified by social class and gender. The truly forgotten aspect here is not just the specific practices, but the systemic inequalities inherent in medieval healthcare provision and the largely unacknowledged contributions of women. It suggests that while formal medical institutions were largely male dominated and theory driven, practical, community level care was often female led and empirically based, creating a dual system of healthcare. This also points to a broader societal pattern where women's knowledge and labor, particularly in domestic or informal spheres, were systematically undervalued or even demonized, their quiet strength and dedication often lost to the official histories. The persistent hum of daily life in a village, the lowing of cattle, the rustle of straw, the quiet laughter of children, these were the sounds that surrounded these unsung healers, their vital work woven into the very fabric of community existence, often unseen, but deeply felt. Challenges, limitations, and the shifting tide. As we near the end of our quiet journey through medieval medicine, it's important to acknowledge the profound challenges and inherent limitations that practitioners faced. Their ingenuity was often remarkable, but it was perpetually constrained by a fundamental lack of scientific understanding. This ultimately led to the gradual abandonment of many practices as new scientific paradigms slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to emerge, shifting the very lens through which humanity viewed health and disease. Lack of germ theory, the invisible enemy, a fundamental, crippling limitation of medieval medicine was the complete absence of understanding regarding germs, microorganisms, or even the precise functions of human organs. This profound knowledge gap severely hindered their ability to prevent diseases from spreading and, crucially, effectively treat infections, which often lingered for long, agonizing periods and were frequently fatal without what we now know as antibiotics. Imagine the sheer helplessness of watching a small cut on a finger swell and blacken, knowing it could lead to death, yet having no idea why. Despite knowing from bitter experience that wounds, childbirth, and surgical procedures carried significant risks of infection, practitioners could do little to actively combat these invisible, deadly foes. The air, unseen, was filled with unseen perils. Poor sanitation, particularly in densely populated trading towns, directly contributed to the relentless proliferation of diseases, including widespread parasitic infections that gnawed at the insides of countless individuals. The pervasive, sickly sweet scent of disease, of unwashed bodies and stagnant waste, would have been a constant backdrop to daily layout. Imagine the constant, low grade abdominal pain, the gnawing hunger that was never truly satisfied due to internal parasites, the persistent feeling of weakness and malaise, the quiet anxiety of every new cut or scrape, the nervous watch for signs of inflammation, knowing that any small breach in the body's defenses could spiral into a fatal illness, the distant cough from a neighbor, the shared cup at the tavern, the very air you breathed, all held invisible threats, leading to a constant, underlying sense of vulnerability. Impact of major pandemics, the Black Death's shadow. The limitations of medieval medicine were never more brutally exposed than during the terrifying onset of major pandemics. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, represented the most significant and devastating challenge to medieval medicine and society as a whole. Originating in Istanbul in 1347, this silent, creeping horror rapidly spread across Europe via bustling trade routes, leading to catastrophic mortality rates. Some areas experienced truly unimaginable population losses, with up to 90% of their inhabitants succumbing to the ravages of the plague. Imagine the eerie, overwhelming silence that would descend upon a once bustling town, broken only by the incessant tolling of church bells, signaling yet another. The sickening, sweet smell of decay would hang heavy in the air, a pervasive reminder of the unseen. Treatments for the plague were desperately limited, a poignant testament to human helplessness. They ranged from superstitious remedies and fervent prayer to rudimentary herbal medicines and futile attempts to clear the air of perceived miasma or poison through burning fragrant herbs. The prevailing belief that the plague was a divine punishment, a scourge sent from God for humanity's sins, led to a tragic disregard for vital public health measures. Simple, yet crucial, actions like controlling the rampant rat populations in towns and villages, which were the primary carriers of the disease, were largely ignored. This inaction was a major factor in the plague's devastating impact, allowing the invisible enemy to spread unchecked. The Black Death also relentlessly ravaged the Nordic kingdoms, its spread exacerbated by increased international trade and population movement, carrying death across the seas and into remote fjords. The sounds of ceaseless weeping, the low, guttural moans of the dying, the rhythmic thump of bodies being carried away. These were the horrifying symphony of the Black Death, an overwhelming, incomprehensible catastrophe that shattered any illusion of medical control. Reasons for abandonment: the shifting medical imagination. The eventual abandonment of these deeply ingrained medieval medical practices, particularly amid present humoral theory, was not a sudden, dramatic event, but a complex, protracted process spanning several centuries. Humoral theory, despite its long standing influence, began a gradual decline in the 17th century, slowly giving way to more modern understandings of disease. This profound shift was driven by the slow but inexorable emergence of new scientific approaches to medicine, including the revolutionary concept of germ theory and more rigorous anatomical studies that began to dissect the body with a new empirical lens. Bloodletting, once a cornerstone of humoral practice, was a prime example of this gradual William Harvey's groundbreaking work on the circulation of blood in 1628 scientifically contradicted the very basis for bloodletting, showing blood was not a stagnant fluid to be drained, but a vital, circulating force. Later, in the 1830s, Pierre Charles Alexandre Louis, through meticulous observation and statistical analysis, definitively demonstrated its ineffectiveness in treating conditions like pneumonia and various fevers, dealing a final, decisive blow to its efficacy. Imagine the quiet disbelief, then the growing conviction among physicians as empirical evidence slowly, patiently overturned centuries of tradition, the subtle whoosh of a new idea taking hold, the quiet murmur of intellectual challenge spreading through the academic halls. The abandonment of bloodletting was a complex process influenced by a confluence of factors beyond mere scientific disproof. The rise of empirical thought, particularly French skeptical empiricism, challenged traditional medical dogmas, encouraging a new questioning spirit. A profound new belief emerged that the human body possessed inherent self healing capabilities, fostering a growing faith in nature's powerful, gentle healing force rather than aggressive intervention. Growing dissatisfaction and a stark awareness of the dangers of excessive blood loss from patients likely contributed significantly to its decline, as people experienced its devastating consequences firsthand. This was coupled with the slow, almost imperceptible introduction of new therapeutic approaches that offered alternatives to traditional, often brutal, methods. Competition from sectarian practitioners, such as homeopaths and Thomsonians, who often derided orthodox therapies like bloodletting as barbaric and ineffective, also offered alternative models of care, providing patients with other options. The subtle clink of new instruments, the fresh scent of different concoctions, the quiet murmur of new philosophies, these were the sounds and sensations of change. Perhaps the most profound reason for the decline was a fundamental shift in the very medical imagination. The conceptualization of the human body transitioned from an open, malleable system characterized by fluid flows, a sort of hydraulic model where substances moved freely, to a closed, fixed body with distinct boundaries. In this new view, flows into the body were seen as a tax. Flows within became less relevant, and flows out were treated as dangerous losses of vital energy. This transition from flow managing to boundary protecting medicine significantly contributed to bloodletting losing favor among physicians. The body was no longer a vessel to be drained, but a fortress to be defended. The decline of humoral theory and bloodletting was not a sudden, singular event, but a complex, protracted process spanning several centuries. This abandonment was driven by a confluence of scientific discoveries, philosophical shifts, societal pressures, and, critically, a fundamental change in the conceptualization of the human body. This demonstrates that medical progress is rarely a simple linear progression of better science winning, but rather a complex interplay of scientific advancement, intellectual reorientation, and social dynamic. The soft thump of an old textbook being closed, the faint rustle of a new scientific paper being opened, these were the sounds of an entire worldview slowly, gently transforming the nuance of forgotten. This section reveals that forgotten practices were not merely abandoned because they were bizarre or ineffective in isolation. Rather, they faded because the entire underlying worldview and scientific paradigm of medicine shifted. It underscores the immense difficulty of overturning deeply entrenched theoretical frameworks, even in the face of emerging empirical evidence, until a more coherent and compelling alternative model emerges. This offers a meta understanding into the history of science itself, how knowledge is constructed, challenged, and eventually replaced through a multifaceted process rather than a simple triumph of truth. The quiet, steady march of new ideas, sometimes barely perceptible at first, slowly, gently pushing aside the old, the subtle hum of intellectual curiosity ever seeking new understanding, a continuous, quiet quest. Conclusion. And just like that, we have gently journeyed through a forgotten landscape, exploring a day, or perhaps merely a glimpse of countless days, in the world of medieval medical practices. It's a world defined by unrelenting hardship, by the invisible threat of disease, by the complex tapestry of ancient theories, spiritual beliefs, and surprisingly pragmatic ingenuity. We've seen how their unique blend of observation and understanding, however flawed, shaped every facet of their approach to healing. We began by understanding the theoretical foundations, the pervasive humoral theory, with its delicate balance of four vital fluids, dictating both health and personality. We then floated upwards, examining the profound influence of astrology, where celestial movements were believed to whisper secrets about the body and guide the very timing of treatment. And we felt the heavy weight of spiritual and supernatural beliefs, where sickness was often interpreted as divine punishment or demonic influence, leading to a reliance on prayer, charms, and pilgrimages. We then explored their diagnostic methods, relying on the sharpened senses of the practitioner, the meticulous, multisensory examination of urine and uroscopy, the careful interpretation of the body's rhythm through pulse diagnosis, and the fundamental reliance on general observation and patient history. These were early, systematic attempts at empirical observation, however rudimentary. Our journey continued through the tapestry of their therapeutic approaches. We smelled the earthy scent of herbalism, the backbone of their remedies, from soothing chamomile to pain relieving hemp. We flinched at the thought of crude surgical interventions, like amputations and the startling practice of trepanning, yet noted the surprising survival rate. And we confronted the truly bizarre, the pervasive danger of bloodletting, the unsettling efficacy of maggot therapy, the macabre consumption of mummy powder, and the repulsive, yet sometimes use of dung ointments. We also touched upon their desperate attempts at pain management, using opium or the often lethal concoction known as Diwali. We then delved into the Viking Age as a case study, stripping away romanticized notions to reveal a populace plagued by severe dental issues, chronic infections, and debilitating osteoarthritis, yet surprisingly dedicated to personal hygiene. Their short life expectancies underscored the harsh realities of a world without modern medicine, where disease and injury were constant companions. Finally, the considered the practitioners themselves, the university educated physicians, the practical barber surgeons, the monks preserving knowledge, and the unsung folk healers, midwives, and nurses, especially women, whose crucial contributions were often invisible in official records. Perhaps now you have a slightly clearer understanding of why even a single day in the Middle Ages, with its pervasive illness and rudimentary cures, would be an almost insurmountable challenge for most of us today. It wasn't just about physical ailments, it was about a profound mental fortitude, an unparalleled ability to adapt to a life stripped bare of many comforts, a life of constant, brutal demands. Each breath was a test, every step a struggle. It's a quiet reminder of the vast differences between eras and of the incredible resilience humanity has shown throughout history in its unending quest for healing. Thank you for joining me on this gentle historical journey tonight. Thank you for lending your precious time to listen. I hope these quiet explorations have offered you a moment of peace and a gentle passage into slumber. Now, let these thoughts slowly dissolve, like wisps of smoke drifting across a forgotten medieval village. Let the soft whispers of ancient prayers, the distant, rhythmic drip of water in a monastic garden, and the faint, lingering scent of old remedies guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be truly undisturbed.